Welcome back for another Green Box Politics episode. It's Red Stem Mirage and I'm back. What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? So in this evening's production, we will analyze the character of Caine from the early 90s movie, Menace to Society. And we want to basically evaluate and analyze his life, some of the choices he made, and why actually did Caine die in this movie. Now, Caine represents an archetypal male or man that is present in many of the neighborhoods and communities and hoods throughout North America as it pertains to so-called Black American people. So that means that a lot of the young men in our communities, there are a lot of Caines walking around. And when I say that, what I mean is you have the young man who is torn between two worlds. He's torn between the world of his lower carnal self and the world of his higher self. He's torn between the worlds of making poor choices, the influences and impulses of the lower self, his animal nature, and his higher mind, his higher intuitive consciousness that will lead him to make more spiritual choices that will involve himself and others around him winning in the end. So although we are human beings and although we are all men, but we have two natures, and you have to understand this. And while you're on this life journey and this life experience, you're going to have various archetypes and various predicaments and circumstances you find yourself in. And some of them will be inspiring your lower nature and will, lead you to react or respond in your lower nature. And some of them will lead you to respond in your higher nature. When it comes to the friends you deal with, family members, the people that you decide to date, the women, they all represent ultimately an archetypal form that is gravitated or attracted to your lower self energy or your higher self energy. All right. So that's something you should ask yourself if you're in the streets, the people that are around you, do they tend to bring out your lower nature? Do they tend to inspire you or influence you to make choices that will lead you to let's say a favorable end? Or do they lead you to make disastrous choices, dangerous choices? So you have to ask yourself, am I around somebody that is basically catering to my lower self energy, my animal energy, or my higher self energy? All right. And in this movie, that is what Caine found himself dealing with throughout the entire movie. Throughout the entire movie, you could tell that Caine, he grew up in a household where he didn't have his parents. All right. And he was being raised by his grandparents. And they lived in the projects in Watts in Los Angeles, California. So they already giving you a background that Caine is coming from a situation where the family structure is broken. All right. But what his grandparents are doing is they're trying to guide him to the best of their ability. And throughout the movie, his grandfather is giving him a lot of game, telling him about the streets and how he needs to leave a lot of that negative behavior alone, and where this could end up, where his destination could be in life if he doesn't make the right choices. And his grandparents, in particular his grandfather, he would use a lot of religious parables and religious metaphors. But that was the way he chose to express the information that he was trying to distribute to Caine, which is ultimately you need to start making more higher self choices because you're on the wrong road. Throughout the movie, Caine also had a friend named Sharif, was a young brother. And I believe he was dealing with Islam in the movie. But what that was showing you is he represented that archetypal young so-called Aboriginal, or really so-called Black, but really Aboriginal American man that had some type of a consciousness, understood the, devastating effect of the streets, and understood, the potholes and where it's going to lead you. So he's that one that's always, either preaching or trying to tell other brothers like, we need to leave this BS alone. We need to start making better choices. In other words, he's trying to lead the brothers to make more higher self choices, more higher self decisions. So the grandparents and Sharif represented the higher self or the higher consciousness in making those types of decisions. They represented more of that and that angel on the right shoulder of Caine, telling him the truth and telling him what he needs to hear. And also, let's think about Sharif's character. He had his father in his life. All right. Remember how Sharif and his father were having a conversation. And when Caine walked in, his father was basically asking him, that Sharif and some of the guys were going to move to, I believe, Kansas. And he was asking Caine, are you going to move as well? Because here in Los Angeles, I know what you're doing. You running the streets. You're involved in a lot of chaotic activity. And basically that the so-called black man in America, the Aboriginal American man, that he is being hunted. He's being hunted by these corporations. He's being hunted by these private bankers. He's being hunted by the government. And he's being hunted by all these foreign interests that make money off of the degraded state, the humiliated state that the so-called black man is in when it comes to this country. Now, him being a grown man and being much older, you could tell he was given a game that more than likely Caine either didn't know or he wasn't accustomed to hearing most of the time. Just like how Lawrence Fishburne, the father on Boys in the Hood of Trey, how he was giving the game to the youth in the community and how they were listening, but they couldn't really understand the substance and the value of what he was saying because it wasn't being reinforced by their parents at home. And remember, Caine had grandparents, but his parents were not at home. So a lot of this, information he was getting from Sharif's father, it may have been the first time he was hearing it because he obviously can see that this is the source of where Sharif is getting it from. And also you had Jada Pinkett. Now she represented like a love interest in the movie. And she was also catering or appealing more to his higher mind and his higher conscience, trying to get him to make the right type of decisions to set his life up for success and to leave certain criminal street activity alone and a certain criminal street dangerous environment. So when it came to Sharif's father, his grandparents, and Jada Pinkett's character, they represented the higher mind, the higher conscience, or that angel on the side of, that angel on the shoulder of Caine. Now on his left shoulder, the demonic side, Caine's lower self, his animal self, you had the appeal of Old Dog. Now Old Dog represented that young hot wire, that young brother in the streets who more than likely didn't have his parents around either, because you don't hear about Old Dog's parents. You don't really get any background information on Old Dog and his household. What you just are introduced to is the introduction scene to where they go and commit that crime in the convenience store. And then they have that tape. And now Old Dog is showing it all around the hood. So they're showing you and introducing you to him that this guy is very, very wild and he's out of control. And although he's portrayed as the younger between him and Caine, but you can kind of see that he had a stronger influence over Caine. Now, there were times where Caine's higher self would battle with Old Dog's lower self, like in the situation where they were in the car and they were about to get revenge for Caine's cousin Harold being killed, and how Old Dog was in the vehicle basically saying like he was a young nigga that didn't give a fuck and that he'll step on anything, he'll smoke anything. And he was saying that right after Caine was saying, look, now I'm not going to go and kill no women and children. We looking for these guys that killed Harold, but, he wanted to go about it a certain way. And the way that AWACS and Old Dog responded was like, nigga, you scared or something like that? So you had that peer pressure aspect of the carnal self, the lower self, that is trying to get Caine to ultimately ignore what his higher conscience is telling him. And that's what Old Dog represented. He represented that young guy who really had no understanding. He had no kind of elders around to give him the truth. And the people that were around that were older that may have given that knowledge, he would just kind of shun them off because he was around a lot when Sharif would talk. But Old Dog paid it no attention. So Old Dog, he was the type of energy and the type of archetype that catered to Caine's lower self. And as you can see, a lot of the activities when him and Caine would get together, it was a lot of lower self, negative street shit that they would do. All right. I want you to think about AWACS, MC8's character. All right. Now, he was basically the older guy between all three of them. You would have Caine, AWACS, and Old Dog. AWACS was the older guy, but he was a very, very poor influence. And he catered to Caine's lower self because he, it was that older dude that was more like, man, if I was y'all young niggas, I'd be smoking shit. And, man, y'all don't know how to really step on nothing. Y'all should have came and gotten me. And, you know what I'm saying, man, y'all sound like a bunch of pussies and y'all scared and, like that type of guy. And we all got that type of person in the hood as well. And when you let that person influence you, he's catering to your animal or your lower self. And what he's doing is he's trying to antagonize you to make you feel like you're not really this street nigga. You're not really down. You know what I'm saying? You a coward, or, oh, you scared, and, oh, they got Harold and you're not going to do nothing about it. So he really was like influencing Caine in like a negative way. And also think about even when AWACS and Chauncey were at the cookout and Caine was in the parking lot and he met the young woman, Alina. And how AWACS was like, oh man, Caine over there talking to that bitch, and and really was like player hating on Caine and trying to yell at Caine, telling him to come over and all this other stuff while Caine was sitting there trying to talk to the young woman. So bro was a bad negative influence as well. He was one of them older guys that'll send you off on a dummy mission. You know what I'm saying? So that was him. And so he catered to the lower self, and he was one of those characters. I also want you to think about when Caine robbed, you know what I'm saying, the brother in the movie. And remember how the brother was trying to appeal to him as like, damn, bro, we from the same ethnic national class. You know, you trying to rob basically somebody that's of your own people. And Caine didn't give a fuck, you know? So you had Caine, you know, the lower self when he was out trapping and, you know, slanging rocks. And then, you know, now he's out robbing stuff. You know, he's hitting licks. And then, you know what I'm saying, now he's driving in the Mustang, you know what I'm saying, with the gold rims. You know, he's thinking he's that fly dude or whatever, pulling up in the projects. You know what I'm saying? Everybody know who he is. So he's liking that street cred and that street energy that the lower self and that animal nature, you know, attracts when you looked at it as this wild, aggressive force, you know, and he liked it. You know what I'm saying? So that was one of the first errors he made. And why he died is that high that he got from, you know, having a face card in the streets and people knowing him for stepping on stuff or being involved with, you know, real gangsters and real activity. He actually, like, you know, he got high off of it. He liked it. You know what I'm saying? And when you find niggas in the streets like that, they're going to always put themselves in situations to get that clout and that face card because it gives them that high of that social currency and that credit that they get from everybody looking at them like they just a real stomped down gangster. You know, so Caine, that was one of his downfalls, that he had that type of mentality. Another downfall he had was the downfall of his, you know, his lower animal sexual nature. You know, another things that you'll notice with a lot of niggas in the streets is they have a carefree mentality. Not only when it comes to law enforcement and not only when it comes to, let's say, opposition in the streets that may, you know, take them out, but even when it comes to the women, like they feel like and think that they can just, you know, run up in any woman and not really putting two and two together, like who this woman may be connected to, who are her family members, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how Caine was in the movie. So think about it. He met old girl at the park. You know what I'm saying? Nice looking young woman. He's talking to her, but you got to think in the context of real life. They all from the projects. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of Menace to Society, they filmed it on Grape Street. Now, for all my LA niggas that know, like that's a real place. And those powder blue buildings that you saw in Menace to Society, I believe like those are some of the real projects in Los Angeles because it's not that many of them. So Caine, if you from the projects and y'all are from the same area, everybody that's, you know what I'm saying, down with, you know, the streets, they're going to kind of know about each other. Everybody know who's related to who. Everybody know whose baby mama is who. Y'all know how the hood is and how the streets are. You know what I'm saying? Everybody kind of know who's connected to what and who's networked or plugged in with who. So Caine being carefree and not really paying attention to that, not really thinking about that, because maybe he thinking that, oh, me and my guys, you know, we'll step on anything, or, you know, I'm the man and I can't be touched. But Caine not even realizing that, you know, this girl is connected to some real hitters because her cousin ends up approaching Caine after Caine got the girl pregnant. Now, I also want you to think back on when she called Caine and told him for the first time she was pregnant. I want you to think about how it was thundering and lightning. It was dark and it was raining when she called Caine and when Caine was at home when he picked the phone up. That was the cinematography or the director, the screenplay artist trying to show the viewer that there is a certain negative demonic spirit or energy that is supporting Caine and that is behind Caine and that Caine is playing with. Because when it was thundering and lightning, while she was telling him that, hey, I'm pregnant, and he was saying like, oh man, well, you know, the child isn't mine, and basically just like blew her off. When it was thundering and lightning, that was like an esoteric or occult symbol for this is going to be tied into his demise and how his whole empire and his life is going to come to an end. Because what we later on find out is that that girl is connected to, you know what I'm saying, the cousin. Now, the cousin approaches Caine in the projects. And, you know, he basically is saying like, look, you know what I'm saying? I heard you got my cousin pregnant and, you know, I don't like the way you treating her and stuff like that. So, you know, he pressed Caine about that. And instead of, you know, Caine, I guess, having a conversation with this guy and trying to, you know, come to either some kind of conflict resolution or conclusion or whatever the case is, Caine allowed his lower carnal self and his animal nature to take over. Now, remember, Old Dog was right there with him. And we already know how Old Dog influences Caine. So when you got niggas around you in the streets and all they do is lower self stuff, they gonna inspire and motivate you with like and to respond in the lower self way. So, Caine subconsciously knowing that when a cousin approaches him, you know what I'm saying? Instead of talking it out, he immediately hits the guy and starts beating the guy up in front of everybody in the projects. All the children are there, all the other street niggas, all the women are there, the old folks, like everybody is seeing it. And he just stomping this guy out, stomping this guy's head in. And old dog in the back hyping it up. And then eventually the grandfather comes and pulls Caine in the house. And then, old dog stumps on the guy some more. So Caine didn't even think for once, like how he just had embarrassed this guy in front of everybody. And another thing you got to think about too is that, niggas in the streets, their egos are very fragile. And especially if it's a crowd of people. So like maybe if they had gotten to a fight one-on-one and he lost and nobody was around, maybe the cousin wouldn't have responded the way he did. But just for the mere fact that everybody was around like that, this dude done got my cousin pregnant. And then on top of that, the cousin was like, I'm a real hitter too. Like I'm connected to some real gangster shit too. So he was like, okay, I got something for that. So then we go to the part where, when the grandparents pull Caine in the house, they ultimately tell him like, look, bro, you got to leave. Like we've been trying to influence you to, go into your higher self and make the right choices and, get away from certain street stuff, but you're not getting it. Like they see you still leaning towards the lower self. And if that's what you want to do, then you go do that, And also I want you to think about as well when, him and old dog did the situation in the beginning in the convenience store, the investigators and the police was on his ass real hard, pressing him about, well, what's going on with this situation and blah, 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 blah. So you have that situation, Now, I also want you to think about this too, when you got to watch these females and these women in the streets, because and not all the time it's the woman's fault, but you got to understand how the man's ego work when it's in concert with the woman included in the streets. Now, there was two situations where a female got Caine fucked up. The first situation was with old girl Alina, the cousin. You remember the cousin came back and eventually got him in the end. And then also think about the dude who played Pinky on Friday. I can't remember his real Clifton Powell, I think. I think that's the actor's name, but the dark-skinned brother in the movie. And remember how, he was kind of pushing up on Jada Pinkett's character? And then Caine beat bruh up. Caine beat him up. Now, remember, old dog was, showing that tape. And they had a tape of the murder that happened when they was in the convenience store. So after he beat up, Powell or Pinky's character, from Friday, rather. After he beat old boy up, you remember how when he got mad at Caine, he told his homeboy, he's like, shit, I'm about to turn this tape in to the police. And then he was like, fuck Caine. Remember that part? So that was another situation that got Caine messed up. When he beat up old boy in front of old girl trying to protect Jada Pinkett's character and stuff like that. So just like Jada Pinkett didn't really, cause the situation, and just like Alina didn't necessarily cause the situation, but you got to watch these niggas' egos, man, when women are involved in the streets. Because something that may have not been that serious, but when they're involved in it, now these lower-minded, carnal self, animal self niggas feel like they gotta, make up for their bruised ego, and that'll lead them doing some extra shit that they really don't need to do. So now we're gonna go, into the conclusion, and what ultimately happened to Caine. What ultimately happened is Caine was a victim of, retaliation from the one that you didn't expect. So he had underestimated him, and this is another mistake that people be making in the streets. You thinking that because, you from a certain gang or a certain set or a certain part of the city, and you going around, you bullying everybody, and you kind of used to getting away with it. And maybe you bullying a certain person now, or you done beat up or robbed a certain person that you think maybe won't really retaliate, or, you know what I'm saying? Or you heard that bro was a hoe, or you heard that somebody had beat him up before or something like that. So you felt like, oh, well, he ain't gonna really come back to get me, or if I do something to him, maybe the outcome would be like these other situations when he got tried or punked out or whatever, right? So the law of underestimating someone, Caine failed at that, because out of all, I would say, gangster movies that, show the Aboriginal American experience, when them dudes pulled up on Grape Street at the end of Menace to Society, and they had them black masks on, And no boy was sitting on, you know what I'm saying, sitting out the car with that black mask, and the way they came around that corner, and how all the sound in the movie stopped and it went in slow motion. And that was one of the most gangster scenes in the history of Aboriginal American street experience. It was, man. You know what I'm saying? It was the most gangster scenes I know that I've ever seen. And it was the most realistic too. And they pulled up, you know what I'm saying? Of course, they wet everybody up. Now, let's look at the odds of what happened, because this is also what happens in the streets too. Sometimes the nigga that's the live wire that's getting into a bunch of stuff that everybody subconsciously feels like, man, one day somebody either gonna kill bro, or he gonna get locked up because he just too wild and he won't listen. A lot of the times when stuff go down in the streets, he's not the one that ends up getting hit and killed. The one that ends up getting hit and killed are usually one that's innocent, that may have been that one that was torn between two worlds and had the potential to be angelic, but he just didn't make the right choice in the right time. Or the brother that wasn't involved in none of it and was telling niggas that, man, we need to get out of the streets. And that's exactly what happened, because when they came, who got hit up? Sharif got hit up. Y'all remember how bad they did Sharif? I mean, they left damn near like 10 holes in Sharif. He was dead on arrival. Like, he was dead on the scene. And he just was laid out, man. And think about how the whole movie Sharif was telling them, like, man, we need to get out of this stuff. And Sharif's father was trying to give them the game. So imagine the pain that Sharif's father was going to experience when he heard about what happened. And then, of course, O'Dall, he was sitting there shooting. He just bit target in the middle of the yard, and O'Dall don't get hit at all. And then, of course, Caine, he's trying to, you know, block the little boy, and then Caine gets wet up. Doop, 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 doop. They put so many holes in Caine, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was over with. So the image that you see on the screen right now, this is that image that a lot of street niggas experience and see when it's too late. You know, niggas out here that's playing around, they not really listening. You know, you got certain elders and certain partners telling them like, hey, bro, you know, you need to chill out, or hey, man, you need to kind of cool out and, you know, re-rock it and do something else, or hey, bro, you in a little too many beats, man. Maybe you should move and go to another city or another state. This is that experience that you have. You see? Because right here, this is what Caine is experiencing. He's experiencing the flashback. Because think about what was happening at this part of the movie when his spirit was talking. And he was having flashbacks through all his memories. That's what happens when you about to, you know what I'm saying, when that physical body is about to conclude and you about to have to go back to the upper room. You start having flashbacks and start having, you know, visions of certain past occurrences, you know, conversations you had, the good, the bad, etc. And that's what Caine was experiencing. And as he was talking through the narration, he was saying, like, he knew he was gonna have to deal with old boy at one point, but he ain't never think he was gonna come back like this. He didn't think bro was gonna come back blasting like that in broad daylight early in the morning. Because remember, they was about to go out of town. They was about to go to Kansas. They was packing up in the van. What were the odds that old boy came back that morning? So now Caine got hit up. Now you're going into seizures. Your heart beating real fast. Your organs are starting to fail. The faster your heart beats, the more your blood pumps. The more blood you start to lose through the holes that your body has received from those gunshots. Your muscles start to relax. Caine could have urinated or defecated on himself at that moment. Your brain consciousness starts to go in and out. Your muscles begin to spasm. That's why Caine started making them crazy faces. The foam starts to mix in with the blood through your esophagus, and you begin to choke on your own blood. And you can feel the death slowly seeping in. The auditory factor, when he's hearing Chauncey tell him to stay alive, stay alive, stay alive. It's going in and out. And Chauncey's voice is fading more and more and more and more and more to where he don't hear him no more. And then next thing you know, Caine is dead. So we want to think about, you know, a lot of the mistakes that Caine made. And these are mistakes that a lot of people are making in the streets every day, not knowing that this could happen to anybody that's out there playing with the devil. You know, when you're dancing with the devil in the streets and you're knee deep in it, in certain gang violence or any kind of violence, you know what I'm saying? It can get to that. It can get to that, you know? So we just want to think back on, some of the mistakes that Caine made and why he died. And a lot of it was the ego. And it was also this too. He said towards the end, he said that his grandfather had asked him, does he value and cherish his life? And he says that I do, but now it's too late, because that was his soul talking, but his physical body was dying. So what also happens too with a lot of street niggas is that when you had the grandparents and the sheriffs of the world telling you like, hey bro, you need to pull back, you're not really listening, because the streets, and when you out there having fun, it's like a form of entertainment. It's like, this is like, what a time to be alive. Like, you committing all types of crimes, you getting money, it's all type of women, you eating at the best restaurants, like everything is going good. You feeling like, can this ever end? You know what I'm saying? But it's just like that Murder Was the Case video where Snoop Dogg sold his soul to the devil. And then while Snoop Dogg was having fun, the money was coming in and all the women was there. And remember, the same character came and said, just remember who changed your mind, because when you start set tripping, that ass is mine. So at some point, Satan gonna call to get what he wants in return. And what he wants in return is to basically lock you in that lower self so you can lose your life force. All right. And then everybody can feed off of your energy in whatever way they choose. You know what I'm saying? So understand, man, when you're in the streets and you playing with, when you playing with poor choices, this is where it can lead you. And when you dancing on the black and white checkerboard in the streets, you don't know if you're going to be angelic. You don't know if you're going to get full blood demon time. At some point, the demon time experiences and activity, they're going to catch up with you. And that's what Caine stated as well. He said he had done too much to turn around, and he had also done too much to go forward. Like, he had to eventually pay for all the things that he had done, the robberies he had committed. Got old girl pregnant but didn't care. Stumped out the cousin, not knowing that bruh's a Grape Street gangster, probably gangster crip. The police was investigating from the crime he did with Old Dog. Like, time was running out. Like, bro, it's only so much you can take. So he was moving funny, and that's what happened. So that's a classic, man. You know what I'm saying? And, it talks about the Aboriginal American street experience, and we can all learn from the Caine archetype. So y'all stay tuned for the next one. I'm out.